Hey guys, and welcome back. We have a very special episode today. We have some special guests here. We have the Eventhubs crew. What's up, guys? How's it
How's it going?
going?
Hello.
Catalyst and Velociraptor. So we know you guys have been covering Street Fighter 6 very, very hard. And we'd love to have a discussion with you guys because we've been covering it as well. And I guess we'll do like a really general video today. I just want to talk about a couple of topics, but we're about to see a newer build of Street Fighter 6 with the TGS, and we've been watching the same build for like 3 months now. So I think this would be a kind of a good kind of a checkpoint for us to just hear your thoughts on like how the game is currently, and we'll see when we see the new footage, what kind of changes they'll do. So I guess I want to start off with just what are you guys' current likes about the game right now? Like, what are you guys liking about it? Everything that's changed so far from Street Fighter 5 to Street Fighter 6 in general.
This guy played it, so I think we should start with him.
Catalyst, what are your thoughts? You're the only one who's played it here.
Some people like this, some people don't, but I call it Street Fighter 5.5. That actually came directly from Punk with talking with him, and either the best Street Fighter 5 player of all time or one of them. But the game is different enough where I think that people who don't like 5 will have enough to latch onto here. The game feels. The game feels more like a cross of old Street Fighter, but definitely new things with it because it's the same development team that made Street Fighter 5. So it's a lot of the same people, but they do realize the reputation that game has, and they are trying to readily update it and make it different. And the biggest thing that people need to understand going into this game is that the drive system is extremely important. All the different drive impacts, drive parry, drive rush, all that stuff is extremely important to wrap your head around and to use pretty much at all points in time. Resource management is like one of the most important parts of the game.
Do you guys think that maybe because we're approaching it from playing Street Fighter 5 for so many years that maybe it feels like Street Fighter 5 because that's the only way we know how to kind of play the game, especially since a lot of the mechanics are kind of returning mechanics with a fresh take, and maybe we're applying those mechanics in the way we would with Street Fighter 4, 5, etc.
Velociraptor, what do you think of that?
Yeah. You always play with what's your muscle memory. It's like when you switch characters in the middle of a tournament set, and you'll do a DP with a character that doesn't have a DP because your first one does. I've been playing Third Strike a lot with a buddy of mine, and like we started out just throwing fireballs like crazy because we come from more of like Street Fighter 4 and stuff, and like now we've understood parry enough that we're not doing it. So yeah, of course you're always going to be kind of like your muscle memory sort of tuned in a certain direction. So one, that's like everyone's playing from that context and that perspective, and that's not to take away from the claim that it does feel like 5.5. I think John and I have talked about it a lot, and he has further evidence that like, hey, this lines up with this feels like this causes you to feel or act in a certain way just like it did in Street Fighter 5, things along those lines. But I would also say, like, take that with don't get mad and yell on the internet about that because it's way too early for that level of judgment to it. So maybe, and of course it's going to have some Street Fighter 5 flavors, like it's jumping from there, of course, but perhaps not so much that it can't have its own very distinct identity.
I was going to say Street Fighter 5.5 is still a half of a new game at the very worst. People hear the 0.5 on there, it's like, okay, there's still a lot of new stuff. But Murray, you were going to say.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say you can see it from the footage that we have of players playing the game that there's a lot of mechanics that are still not implemented correctly or, as much as them probably should be because people are just not used to them. They're new, right? The drive impact, drive rush, whatever. People are experimenting, but they just don't know all the optimal ways of using it. So there's so much to still unlock about this game that we just don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. We don't really know how it feels, but at the same time, we've got an idea at this early stage, and we can like sort of read some tea leaves, and that's all we have right now. So why not, dig into that? But just keep in mind that's where we're at in the process, right?
Let's talk about some of the specific things. One thing I noticed right away is that it seems like Capcom is really trying to once again push towards more neutral. When Street Fighter 5, remember when we were at E3, that's all Combo Thing was talking about. It's like, we want more neutral play. They want that old school Street Fighter 2. No matter what they do, man, it seems like we just never get this neutral talk gameplay. It just never happens.
Oh my gosh.
But if you look at it, the way that the tech throw, how the characters, it's not even round start. They're flying to each corner. And then even when you throw the opponent, they get a back rise now. And I'm seeing less like Unga moves, like low risk, high reward, kind of forward moving moves that are really fast. And it seems like they're trying to, whenever you land a hit or whenever something happens, they're trying to once again push it back into neutral. You guys notice that too?
Yes, there's quite a bit more neutral play as you were mentioning. Now we don't know all the dirty steps yet. We don't know where the Unga Bunga is yet, and of course, there's only a little bit of time before we see those characters emerge, and everyone's pulling their hair out for a month or two until they realize that that move is actually -4 and just punish it. But there's also more awareness, I think, from the developers of trying to avoid that snowball effect that Street Fighter V had and get back more to the neutral play that Street Fighter is known for. And I think that there's very much they're going to reach a better happy medium than what Street Fighter V was, because they're directly aiming to fix that.
Yeah, that's when the transition from 4 to 5 happened, with what the messaging was about 5 and where we were feeling about 4, which was like if Evil Ryu touched you with a low forward, that was a forever combo into the corner and maybe the only thing that he needed, right? And that was a problem with the game. Same thing with Vortex. And so they wanted to move away from that with 5. And so to me, I remember writing an article and comparing it to, like, I think they're trying to make 5 like where you're fencing and it's all proper and such. Someone gets a hit, it knocks down, and then the whole thing resets and they go back and they do it again. And so therefore it's more decided by those, a higher number of touches as opposed to just snowballing. And 5, especially now, has that a lot. And I think we've been seeing that progression happen over a couple of games, and I see no reason for it to stop in 6. I also will tag on that there are parts of 5 that kind of make that moot, and once a V trigger pops up, that can completely override the significance of all the footsies you were just playing. But it's there is the point. And so yes, I fully expect it to be there. And from what I've seen so far in 6, it really does feel like even more so that dance or that fencing match that I just kind of described. That's fully what I expect, and it's to the point where I'm, the other side of this coin of where everyone's not just clashing all the time is, does that become a little bit boring to watch? And I'm not saying that it looks that way by any means right now, but I'm in the back of my head wondering, is the action going to actually be sort of relatively slow because of this? That it's more likely that we're going that direction than we are just, so
Yeah.
I feel like for Street Fighter V, the way they approached the neutral question was that with Street Fighter 4, they were afraid, well, or rather, as a consequence of Street Fighter 4, they were afraid of putting too many options in because they were afraid of all the option selects that were going on with Street Fighter 4, for example, and kind of like making it a little bit too complicated. So with Street Fighter 5, they just went with a very simple way of designing the game, and as such they removed a lot of options to make everything much more understandable, which helps with neutral, but at the same time it doesn't help with defense, right? Which is kind of like the problem with Street Fighter 5, where rushdown eventually became very, very prevalent just because you didn't have a lot of options on defense, and eventually they built on that by adding defensive mechanics. But so they had this very simple game, but at the same time you didn't have a lot of ways out of pressure, for example. So with Street Fighter 6, it seems like they're going the completely opposite route, in the sense that they are giving you a lot of options, and the fact that you have to keep in mind all these different options and how they interact with each other, on top of the fact that a lot of things keep you in neutral, like we were saying, the throw text sending you very far away, and in general the Oki seems, so far at least, um, less not oppressive, but less prevalent, I would say. Then will create a more interactive neutral game, because there's just so much to keep track of, and as such you can really see the skill come through when everyone's able to counter what your opponent is doing correctly without really narrowing it down to something that is so simple, but to still have a lot of options.
yeah.
But like Velociraptor was saying, if you kind of hold back and you take too many things away and you try too hard to keep it neutral, I don't know on your guys' comments, on your guys' articles, but I'm seeing a lot of comments on my videos on a lot of people saying the game looks slow. This is the same exact thing that happened when Street Fighter V was first shown. It's like, oh, the game is looking too slow. A lot of people perceived, a lot of casual players, especially when they watch strong neutral, they can't see the nuances behind it on why it's special, right? And why it's like high level. So if you go too far in that direction, we're always resetting the neutral, it could be perceived as boring. If you're only taking one single hits with each other.
And
I
the counter to that in Street Fighter 6 is actually the ink effects. And
um,
the ink
well,
effects
yeah.
pop right up there. It's actually something VelocirapTor did a whole video about like if you're going to have these kind of like and it's not a whiff punish necessarily, a punish counter, all that kind of stuff, but you need to have like an ink effect or something pop up there to let the audience know that there's a big thing happening on screen. And so it's not perfect because and a lot of times when you're playing neutral, I don't think you're going to see a bunch of those ink effects, but there's a lot of ink effects built into the game to try to increase the hype, so to speak. So
Yeah,
There's a
that's
mic, Andy.
exactly. Well, I would say that they're trying to put like the Michael Bay explosions and the satisfying hits and stuff like that. That's appealing. Like if someone's walking by and they look and they see the screen in the TV window or whatever, and they're like, oh, I want to keep watching that. It's like they want to have those explosions there, and they do that through basically Drive Impact. And Drive Impact is super sexy right now in terms of like it's really alluring to do. It's cheap relative to the rest of the options on the Drive system, and it's got offensive and defensive components to it, and it makes this huge explosive thing that makes you feel good when you land. It makes you want to play more Street Fighter 6, right? But here's the thing. That's going to be something that it's very appealing to new players that don't know all the nuances of everything. More seasoned players, I hope, are going to not be doing drive impacts left and right. And so, like what John said, there is how much are you actually going to see that stuff, and when it goes off, when it does explode, and when cool things do happen, is that going to be enough to offset a possibly slower neutral and slower build up to it?
Yeah.
Right, for sure. And another thing that I would like to mention is the fact that in past games, you really only had opportunities to do better combos, bigger combos when you either had, ultra, V trigger, or counter hits, right? That's kind of like what, compared to a natural hit combo, really made it pop, really made it exciting for a spectator. But since in Street Fighter 6, punish counters happen on the recovery of moves, then now there's more weight that is being put on the fact that with punishment is important, like blocking things is important. And as such, the cool stuff can happen even when good neutral is displayed, basically.
Mhm.
So like in Street Fighter 5, maybe you could see a very cool buffer or someone that, manages to whiff punish something from far away by hitting an extended hurt box, but it kind of like just ends there because, the system doesn't really support that all that much. Sure, you can see the skill, but in Street Fighter 6, maybe this will, lead to a very explosive combo with a lot of visual effects, and it will be immediately apparent that what happened is, where it's at.
Mhm.
Do you guys think that maybe Capcom missed an opportunity to showcase the game at higher level? Because we've had a couple exhibition matches with Street Fighter V. I mean, like we had Mike Ross and Combo Fiend at the very beginning at Capcom Cup, and then we had Gamer B and Daigo. And I'm wondering maybe with Street Fighter 6, maybe it would have been beneficial for Capcom to give some pros some time to have an exhibition match and just kind of show the game at a higher level, because we're really trickling like footage in here, and we're slowly starting to see, like we just recently saw the benefits of Drive Rush that really opened up the combo system of the game. 'Cause a lot of people thought it was going to be even less than Street Fighter 5. So I
Well,
wonder maybe if they dropped the ball on that. I'm not sure.
they gave a copy for at least some time to Yipes and Li Joe and some people right in New York, and so they got to really explore it, and they put together I think some of the highest level play, if not the absolute highest level play that we've seen yet. So there's that. But are you talking more like it needs to be Daigo and Tokido exploring it, or?
I'm just saying that I think just the optics of it, of
Mm.
showing, hey, this is what the game could be, right? So that if you're having just too many casual players take a look at it, there's obviously at the beginning of Summer Game Fest we had many journalists, right, playing the game and showing it from the casual level, right? That can excite a lot of players, but if you have people showing off the new mechanics and the depth of it, maybe the optics might have been a little bit better. I'm just going back to the whole the combos looking lower than Street Fighter 5. They're dumbing down the game or they're slowing it down. I'm just saying maybe that could have been avoided if there was like an exhibition match. But I in general the feedback has been very positive, right? I'm just kind of thinking about how maybe it could have been perfect or where we're at. 'Cause history kind of repeats itself whenever these games are
now,
announced.
I'm never going to argue against us getting more hands-on time with fighting games because let's let's get that up there as much as possible. But The developers are trying to cultivate a certain image about the game in a certain respect, and the game is actively changing right now. There is a handful of team at Capcom. I'm pretty sure they play online. I'd love to get their CFNs on Street Fighter V, and I'm sure they're all Warlord players or better. I mean, they are ridiculously good in getting those players out there to showcase what they are doing. They would blow anything Tokido or Daigo could do out of the water because they're playing Street Fighter 6 daily, and would be able to showcase so much there. And I'll actually just throw this out there right now. One of the things I'm kind of hoping with Street Fighter 6 is to make them the Shadowloo's gone and dead or whatever, but the Shadowloo bosses of fighting game tournaments and for the first like Street Fighter 6 tournaments is like, okay, whoever wins this, you get to play one of Capcom's development team members.
That would be amazing.
And you get to challenge them, and it's like, oh my gosh, and like, can you beat
Secret
this
boss.
person?
That
Yeah,
sucks for the
so-
development team member though, because they've been playing with each other. They know what's up. You're throwing
Yeah.
them out there in the middle of like whoever just won ranked on day one. That's terrifying.
Yeah, so much
They won the
pressure.
Kali equivalents of.
I've heard these
wins the
legends.
premiere. So,
I've
yeah,
heard this
so-
from Seth Killing. He talked about this before. There's the secret team at Capcom. These guys are animals, right? And they're the ones that help with the balance testing and all of that. And they know what it's like at the highest level play. And sometimes I wonder myself when I read these patch notes that you know how everyone always complains, "Oh, you guys don't understand this character. Why'd you do this change of stuff?" I can just see the team behind them. They're like, "Why don't you guys play this character properly?" You know what I mean? Like, we're the ones doing it. Why can't you guys figure out what these notes mean? I always
They
think
leave
about that when I
little
read the
hints.
patch notes.
Yeah, little hints that they try to transmit to us through brainwaves is like, now understand how the character is supposed to work. But yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to see Washige again. Put it in.
They haven't even
Yeah.
officially announced Washige as the battle director. We just saw on the 35th anniversary that he's there as part of the team, but they haven't outright said he's working on Street Fighter 6. So I'm curious about that too. But I'm seeing it looks similar. Like, I don't see anything drastic. Like, the DPs are still like, non-invincible, only anti-air attacks, that kind of thing. So I'm curious about that. So another thing that I'm really liking about Street Fighter 6 is that since we no longer have the V trigger system, I feel like these characters are way more fleshed out, way more robust. Even looking at Ryu, this looks like the most robust version of Ryu I've ever seen. It's like Marvel Ryu. He's got many more moves. Like, Ryu's supposed to be the ordinary guy, and even Guile has more than 2 moves, special moves. Like, it's interesting because it's kind of like almost like V Trigger kind of had to hold back these characters a little bit because their cool stuff has to be tucked in behind V Trigger, right? They can't have all their tools at once. But with Street Fighter 6 now, it's an opportunity where these characters can be, a lot more robust. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, hit the nail right on the head. That's actually something that we heard directly from the developers of. Street Fighter V was not well thought of in terms of the diversity of moves and combos. It was actually the biggest complaint about the game, and they wanted to make sure that that stuff was unlocked right from the get-go, that people had those options available to them. So that is why Ryu is the most robust version that he's ever been. Maybe Third Strike people would argue, but I would say Street Fighter 6 is definitely more. It's Guile's the legend of the man with 2 moves, and it's very clear he's got quite a bit more going for him now. So I think they took what worked in Street Fighter 5 and said, hey, let's put this into the game as much as we can, and then add a little bit more on top of it. And that's one of the things I noticed while playing it is the game feels very fleshed out from that perspective. Where if you compare it to vanilla Street Fighter 5, night and day difference. Maybe current Street Fighter 5 is a little closer, but even then, Ryu feels more complete, or he has more stuff than he even does in Street Fighter 5.
Is that not intimidating for you guys? Like, maybe I'm just a little bit lazy in what I want to do in a fighting game, but I'm already sort of intimidated by having to balance the V system and then thinking about like super complex characters. I played Nikali in Street Fighter 5, so there's that. And this guy played Minot and Rose and other crazy characters. Chun-Li, I think, for a while. But like, is that more exciting to you, or is it like intimidating? Like, oh man, if I wanted to play Tekken and learn 6,000 moves for my character, I'd play Tekken.
Right. No, I completely understand the your preoccupation because if you think about it, as I was saying before, Street Fighter 5, they kind of like limited the amount of things that you need to think about, and as such, it lets you ease up on the mental stack in a lot of ways, right? You don't have to think about all kinds of crazy offense and defense. But that helps, I think, overall with the game You might not like it or whatnot, but I personally enjoyed what it did as far as the player experience. So with Street Fighter 6, yeah, no, absolutely. I look at these characters and see a million different moves. Specifically, and looking at Kimberly, and I'm like, I'm gonna get mixed up with this character at some point, and I'm gonna lose my marbles. I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
it. It's gonna happen because I'm gonna think about 7 different options, and then they're gonna pull a ninth that I didn't even know there was. Uh, that I can understand. But at the same time, one thing that I think is very important is that this is not just offensively, right? Like what the character can do to you, but it's also what you can do to them on defense. There's so many options that they also have to keep track of, that it might not be so obvious to them as to what you might do, right? Of course, we talk about the parry a lot or the drive impact, but I've said it before. The drive reversal, the basically the Street Fighter 6 version of the V reversal, I think it's like a hidden gem that all people don't appreciate because we're finding out more things about it very slowly, just because no one uses it. It seems
Why would they?
boring, but that's another thing that's in there that could help a lot, right? And they have to keep track of that on offense, on top of all the punish counters scenarios that we're gonna have to get used to. I just hope that it never gets to the point where it's kind of like anime fighter level, where you really can never know everything that might happen. That could be a problem, but since it's Street Fighter, I feel like it's not gonna get that crazy.
Just to add on one thing to what Mir said, V reversals are not, or whatever they're called in this one, alpha counters are not throwable right now.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they want you to drive impact them, I think.
It thinks they're kind of making stepping stones because it seems like they're always trying to not add more execution but more depth to all the characters. And now we got there's a lot of stocks. You notice that like Ryu gets stocks now. Jerry has access to all her moves, but she also still has stocks. Jamie's got stocks, right? Kimberly's got stocks. And it's like they're trying to make it so you can play these characters on a surface level and you don't have to be overwhelmed, but you can add another layer to it and kind of use it as a stepping stone, right? Because with Street Fighter 5, you have to know your character's V trigger. That's like half of the round right there. You have to know how to use all those tools right away. But and also like Mir said, the mechanics are all universal. So at the same time, that means a lot of the defensive options are also universal now. So some characters might not, if they have to deal with like an Unga move, right? Let's just say like a Honda headbutt or something like that, or like a Urian shoulder. It's like now drive impact or drive parry will universally help you against these moves. It doesn't matter what character you're playing, you know that's the go-to. So I think that's going to help alleviate some of the mental stack on matchups in general and your characters if everyone has these universal, defensive and offensive tools against things.
As well as learning more characters, because a lot of the mechanics will carry over.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel like not Street Fighter 5.5 in that if this is all indeed the case and it manifests in the game like we're thinking it will, then Street Fighter 5 to me felt like a game that, especially at the beginning, was really not so much about the reactions, and that was also because of the input lag and such, but not so much about the reactions as it was about like having a game plan and choosing like, there's not option selects. They wanted you to have to pick rock, paper, or scissors and make that an informed decision, right? So like that was Street Fighter 5, and what you're describing feels like it's kind of like way not that. Like there's going to be a million options, and it's more of a reaction to the options, as opposed to the make a better battle plan than your opponent and be able to update it in real time more efficiently than them, which is what I think 5 was.
Right, you can look at stuff like a Street Fighter 5 block string and how you can make it safe against V reversals, for example, and they kind of just have to take it basically. And in Street Fighter 6, that's not gonna happen because there's drive impact is frame 1 from what we know, parry is frame 1 from what we know. I mean, just those two already, they can cause a lot of problems to someone doing a simple block and that just tells you how different they are, right? Like, there's nothing that you have to take as far as offense in Street Fighter 6, it seems. In this sense, it's more similar to Street Fighter 3. But Street Fighter 3 also had its fair share of option selects. So I hope it doesn't come to that. But and obviously, parry is not nearly as devastating as it was in that game. So maybe they took lessons from different games just to try and have more variety both on offense and defense, and as such, give you more choice.
In what it feels like right now, you guys have touched on this, but I remember one of the top players who switched from 4 to 5 said like, "Oh, I'm winning every match, and it feels like I've mastered Street Fighter 5 in 20 minutes." That statement did not hold up too well for that player. That player dropped off and stopped playing pretty quickly. What it feels like right now, at the demo build, and what it's going to feel like a year from now when we actually understand the game, I think are going to be fairly different. But right now, because as you guys have said, like we're playing it like it's Street Fighter 5. Why would we not play it that way, right? But we're trying to implement the other stuff, but we really have no idea what we're doing right now.
One thing that's going to really help, one of the problems is that things get optimal really fast, and I want we always have the complaint how certain matchups always just feel watching the same. Like it's hard to distinguish the players that are playing the characters. That was like one complaint about Street Fighter 5 we hear a lot. It's like everything's just kind of played optimally, right? And one thing like I think that Drive Impact's really going to help with in this game is to stop players from playing really predictable, and they have to kind of adapt throughout the match. That's what makes the matches more interesting. So one example is what I'm saying is like if a Ryu player, it's usually optimal for them to always like low forward fireball you and pressure you, right? And they're fishing for hits. But now with Drive Impact, you can't do that. You can't be predictable because you can get hit by Drive Impact, for example. Or if someone is, once again, a Guile player is throwing Sonic Booms close to you, or someone's using a -2 move on you constantly and they're fishing for hits, anything that becomes predictable, Drive Impact's going to help with. And I hope that's what they're trying to go for,
Do you think it's going to make almost everything, well, maybe not almost everything, but a bunch of stuff just into maybe a 50-50 in the same way that Parry did that for Street Fighter 3? Like if you did low forward into fireball, like that block string in Street Fighter 3, like that's not the smartest because they could parry that fireball, and or like even jump-ins, you don't necessarily DP jump-ins because you can parry the DP. So like it turned a lot more situations into interesting, like, well, you have to make a decision here. You're never certain that something's going to happen.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because I did use Street Fighter 3 as an example too. Because Drive Impact kind of been in a way can be like a ghetto red parry, whereas
Mhm.
like if the Ken player kept on doing that same target combo in fishing for super and doing fireball, you could red parry if they're being too predictable, right? Obviously, Drive Impact is way easier to use. So some people might not like that, where nothing you do is certain and everything does have a counter to it. So I guess it just depends on your perspective of it, right? At the same time, a lot of people don't like seeing the same thing over and over again. Some people like to see someone adapting and overcoming some type of strategy, in real time during the match, right?
Well, and
Right.
that could still be the answer of like, well, someone keeps getting drive impacted in their block strings, and that's like the drive impact is the scrubby thing to do because it's a catch-all or whatever. But then it's on the other person to say, well, they're drive impacting a lot. I need to change my game plan up. Wait, perfect parry, drive impact it back, jump, whatever. But I mean, you could argue that's the evolution that you'd be hoping to see. But meh, I don't know.
Yeah. Drive Impact
In this
definitely has the spotlight right now. It's the most flashiest of all the mechanics shown in Street Fighter 6. But the other mechanics are very strong too. They're just like more boring from like a counter perspective. Like drive reversal is really strong. We're no longer sacrificing our V trigger to do it anymore, and it's throw invincible now. That's very strong. It still does the great damage and knocks him back. And obviously there's drive parry. Seems like all eyes are on drive impact. And during that first month, everyone's gonna be spamming that thing. But there is some
Well, during
obvious
that first
counters to it.
5 years, Vesper, 5 years is
I
what
hope
we're
it's
gonna
not 5 years, dude.
we are gonna hate it like we hate spammy crush counters and spammy V triggers. Like that's the new thing, like for sure. And I hope that it's tweaked appropriately. But we're gonna see that a lot. And before I lose it, I hadn't thought about this, but we see how powerful V reversals to keep someone in the corner in 5 are. Well, how important is the corner in 6? And
Yeah.
also V reversals better.
Yeah.
That move right there is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think a good way of looking at this is that, again, I think we are approaching this in an Street Fighter 5 optic. It's like we know how Street Fighter 5 plays, and as such, we already know what's good to do, right? Like what you just brought up is a very good point. The V reversal in the corner is something that is strong in Street Fighter 5 because of how Street Fighter 5 is structured, and as such, Street Fighter 6 could be the same thing. But you could always look at it as you also need to keep in mind more options when you're on the offense yourself. Like there's the risk of being drive impacted in a block string. But now true block strings have true block strings being, there's no gap in between, now have a role again, right? In this sense, it reminds me a little bit of Street Fighter 4, where if you do a block string that's not a true block string, sometimes you could get DP, FADC, backdash, right? And it's
Yeah.
like kind of the same deal in a way. And so it was important sometimes to check the opponent with true block strings because you didn't want that to happen. And as such, this will come back in Street Fighter 6. It's basically another thing that we completely didn't have to care about in Street Fighter 5 almost at all that is coming back. So I'm
I'll
excited
disagree
to
with
see
you
all
at all because I play Rose and I have to deal with that a lot. Where if I don't
Yeah,
get
I
true
can
block
imagine.
screens, I die. But I do agree that fundamentally that was a much bigger deal in 4. But yes.
Right. And that's something that's going to come back. So maybe, well, I mean, obviously it's not just that, but that's one of the things that's going to change how we approach pressure. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of ways of trying to deal with parry and drive impact. I mean, the most obvious one is throw. I think we're going to see so many throws because someone's mashing drive impact or mashing parry to get all block strings. They're just going to get tossed to oblivion and it does a million damage. So then all the game is going to be about how do I avoid getting thrown while still defending correctly, and that could create a complete different defensive meta. And yeah, I mean it's very difficult to theorize about it just because we had so little hands-on experience.
Yeah. Throws are very good in Street Fighter 6, and I think they're going to stay that way. One of the things about Street Fighter Cross Tekken is throws were actually very potent in that game, but they made the throw range about as tiny as humanly possible. And that was something that carried over to Street Fighter 5, where they really shrunk the throw range, but it's back now. It's back like 4. But the thing about it is you don't have option selects now to cover your throw stuff.
Yeah.
And to just sit there and OS all day long and let the game play for itself and make all those choices for you, you actually have to think now. And that's what I love about the modern Street Fighter games and what I hated about 4. Throws, as you said, are going to be extremely deadly, and I love that because the one thing about Catalyst, I'll tell you, I'll speak in the third person now,
He
is
does this.
Catalyst wants to throw you. If I can throw you, I'm going to. And thank you, Capcom, so much for making throws come back because I'm so excited about this.
That's an interesting way of looking at
They're
it.
really
Third
trying to bring it
person,
back to like
yeah.
ST, man, with the burnout, because you're basically just going back to ST when in burnout.
John,
So
how many VelociRaptor? How many controllers have I burned out that for people throw teching against me? Because I
Oh.
feel like I've got about
At least a lot. Well, did you have more on that? Because I have a big fear about Street Fighter 6, and it's the thing that I always sort of find myself gravitating back to. And I wanted to ask Mir and Vesper, I just wanted to bounce it off them and see how they felt about it. Because I know that a lot of what we talk about here, it's like, well, we're in the pre-beta version build. It could change, and it's like talk and speculation is relatively cheap. Sure, fair enough. But we do know that the drive system will be this 5-component system, and it has both to do with offense and defense, and that you're going to have 6 bars of meter. My fear is that people optimize and people find, the best V trigger to use, the best V skill, the best, system in CVS2 and all that kind of stuff, which super is the best in Third Strike. If it turns out that the system itself, like one component emerges as way more useful than the rest, and the meta starts getting built around that, that's going to make things top heavy, and then you are risking losing 4/5 or 3/5 of your huge game defining mechanic if you don't balance it appropriately. And again, that happens a lot in these games.
right. So we're kind of low key going into the concerns about the game. Now that's the last thing we've been talking about. So we're talking about the concerns now, by the way. So to answer your question, with the drive system, this is another thing that Capcom keeps bringing up, is that when you have universal mechanics, but they're different between the characters, you run into problems. So one of the problems with FADC is that even though it's universal, certain characters have different dashes. Certain characters benefit differently because of that. They mentioned that a lot with characters like Zangief, for example, right? And then there's slower characters like Dulcim. And then now with Street Fighter 5, it's kind of the same thing where, like, even the most recent V-Shift, right? Every characters have different types of backdashes, and some characters have better normals that can actually punish things with V-Shift. Some characters can't. They have to hold down the buttons and knock them down. So now it comes to the point with Street Fighter 6. Okay, is everyone's drive impact exactly the same, right? Like, look at Kimberly. It looks high profile, and we see Chun-Li's drive reversal. It seems to do 2 hits. So if there's characters like Dulcim where his drive impact hits full screen, right? What if that happens? We don't know, right? What if there's a character that has a really fast drive impact, but it doesn't hit as far? When you add stuff like that, then yeah, there's gonna be problems for sure.
And then the Magneto is DLC, and it's Marvel versus Capcom 4, baby.
And just to tail on what Vesper said, there is the history is behind Capcom doing exactly that. If you played Dudley or Ryu in Street Fighter 4, your focus attack was godlike.
Yeah.
If you played Rose in Street Fighter 4, you never focus attacked unless it was to absorb stuff because it had 2 inches of range.
Right.
And that is what I think is coming back because, again, we're seeing Chun-Li low profile, some drive impacts and a few other things. And it's like, okay, well, what? This does not look universal to me. And yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's about mechanics stacking up against themselves and how they balance with a character's kit. So, for example, some characters that have weak defense innately, right? Maybe they don't have a 3-frame button. If there are even 3-frame buttons in Street Fighter 6, we don't know that actually. But let's say they have poor defense, they don't have a reversal, they're very slow. Then for them, their drive reversal, for example, or their drive impact will become much more important. And as such, they have to be balanced around the character, right? So maybe those players that play those characters will have to spend most of their drive gauge on those just to keep resetting to neutral because their defense is so poor. But maybe other characters that have good defense naturally, they will spend more of their bar on offensive mechanics like drive rush and such. But they could balance it so that the drive rush is not nearly as effective because it's going to be used more. So in a way, it is a balancing act, and we have to trust Capcom for this because really, there's not much we can say. But I think Capcom has shown a good track record in the sense they've been improving with their balance decisions over time. And overall, I think I trust them to do better than Street Fighter 5 because I think Street Fighter 5 did better than Street Fighter 4 as far as balancing is concerned. So in a way, it's a shot in the dark, a leap of faith. But I trust them to understand that this is a necessary step that they have to take. And by the way the Street Fighter 6 is looking, it seems like there's already a lot of work that has been put into this game, and I can't imagine them just ignoring this part.
Nor I really like how you said that you're not a fan of Street Fighter 4 in the option selects, but you option selected the hell out of that statement where you're like, we can trust Capcom with their balance in regards to they're going to do a better job than Street Fighter 5. And I agree. A lot of the stuff you said actually is mirrored by what the developers have said, which is a good sign because it shows they're aware of this stuff and that they're actually trying to balance around it versus if they were saying like, oh, we have no idea what we're doing. And, Blanca could do 7,000 damage on block and he's fine. It's your statements are matching up very closely with what the developers are saying, which is really good. And it shows they're going to try to implement it in the way that you mentioned.
I'm secretly a developer, guys. I've been found out.
I know we're into fears and complaints and worries and stuff, but that's one of the things that makes me the most excited about the game is because Capcom has shown over the course of Street Fighter 5 and what we've seen with Street Fighter 6 thus far that they've been listening and they've upped their communication, they've changed their practices to what a lot of people are asking for. So if they're getting aligned with those sort of categories, why not think that they're also doing that with the gameplay and the game experience itself? Like I think that we have a pretty good chance. I'm optimistic.
Another thing too about this the drive system is that all the tools are available to the characters immediately, whereas some characters they can't really do anything until they have like their V trigger, for example, with Street Fighter 5. And one way they can help balance it if something becomes too strong is that they can change the amount of drive gauge something uses. If drive rush is too strong, if drive impact is too strong, or drive reversal, they have the option at least of tuning it from that perspective. So that's a little interesting. Another thing too is they are definitely looking at the universal uses of everything because like right now it looks like at least the 4 characters from this base build, every character literally has a low forward drive rush into a medium or a medium heavy B&B, all 4. It's the exact same combo. So they're making sure that everyone's kind of benefiting from these. But with that being said, though, I am concerned about drive rush the more I realize how powerful it is. And I'm worried of there being a drive rush fest because, like as much as I say that you're really focusing on neutral and stuff, there always seems to be this mechanic that kind of sips through the cracks and adds this kind of, low risk, high reward, whether it's V trigger activation or the amount of -2 moves and the Unga moves. But now with Street Fighter 6, this is looking like this is going to be that mechanic where a lot of characters are going to be buffering into Drive Rush. We even see the CPU in the high setting buffering into this thing. Lights can go into combos. If you have even something that's remotely punishable by a light attack, that can go into a full B&B. So are you guys concerned about that?
It's
I'll
really
do a quick
expensive already, right?
Yeah, 3 bars.
3 bars. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. It feels maybe appropriately expensive, but what do we know?
Yeah.
So
Right,
I'm playing Punk at Evo, and I'm doing better against him. And Justin Wong comes up and says, "Hey, do Drive Rush like this." And I look over at Justin. I'm like, "Hey, no coaching." And he's like, "I'm coaching you too. Technically, you can do the same thing." But anyway, it changed the scale and the scope of the match quite a bit, Vesper. And that is one of the things I'm hoping here is that all 3 of those core mechanics, parry, impact, and drive rush, they all stand out in their own way. And they're more of a style choice than they are that this is just the best option and go that way. But right now you do have a good lead on that, where I think that parry is like a distant third. And I would still put drive impact up there because it's like 1 bar and it's like 3 hits of armor and ridiculous damage and all that. I think that's going to change to like 2 bars and a few other things. I would put that as my number 1 mechanic right now. But drive rush, don't sleep on that because it is very potent, and in the hands of a top level player who wants to focus on footsies and whiff punishing, they will blow you the hell up if you don't focus on that aspect of the game.
Right. My worry with Drive Rush specifically is going back to what we were saying before about true block strings and whatnot, is if you do crouching medium kick Drive Rush into a medium, right, to start pressure, if that's a true block string, I don't like that. I don't want to see that. I think if it does have a gap though, then already we know that there's a bunch of ways of dealing with these gaps, right? There's parry, there's drive impact, and even then, if you block, there's drive reversal. So as long as it's not, I spend 3 bars of drive gauge and I'm in for free, then I'm fine with it. I think a lot of the solutions to these situations that we're seeing are just not apparent to us because we just don't understand how the game works. But again, I don't know all the details, right? If crouching medium kick dash forward, oh sorry, drive rush forward into medium is a true block string, I'm concerned. I don't want to see that. To be honest, that seems good.
It feels like V trigger activations all over again, right? Like I hit this button, I V trigger activate, now I'm plus 1,000,000. We're not saying people are plus 1,000,000 with drive rush, but if you're plus, or at least it's a true string, you're right up in someone's face, and you're able to just do that unga bunga pressure that we all kind of hate universally. And it's a really valid concern. And when drive rush was first announced, that was the concern I actually brought up to the team here. Exactly what you said, Mur. So that the devil in the details is going to be really important, and it's something that we can actually put out there with Capcom. As Velociraptor said, they do listen to feedback like this, and if we find out that that's the case, we can do videos and kind of like comment on stuff in this, and they will generally see it and usually tweak that stuff. They're actually fairly plugged into the community, and are, if a voice is loud enough, they will generally respond to it.
I'm thinking about because you can do it off of parry and it's a little cheaper, isn't it? If you do drive rush out of parry as opposed to drive rush out of a cancel from a normal.
Faster, yeah.
So someone throws a fireball at mid range, parry, drive rush forward. Are you in their face, and is that bad for them, or is that reactable for them? Stuff like that might get pretty scary pretty quickly. Or because you can just do it raw out of parry, you don't have to have something hitting you, and especially when you activate that parry and you get that distinct blue aura about you. As we play, that might send the signal to your opponent or anyone that they're in their counter mode, don't hit them. So you freeze up a little bit, and then they pounce forward at you, and it's like, oh no, is it Street Fighter 5 dashes and lag or like that kind of feeling?
Yeah.
Or I mean that's also something that I've considered with Drive Rush.
And it looks like you can cancel drive rush into anything. So let's say in that scenario, someone throws a fireball at you, you parry it, you drive rush forward. The opponent knows you're going to parry drive rush. They do their drive impact, and then you cancel into your drive impact, and then you hit them. And it goes on and on and on, right? So I'm starting to see what you're saying, Velociraptor, on, if is there always a counter for everything, right? Could that be a problem too if they go too hard on that?
But that sounds like, what if the answers are all drive gauge related, and then it becomes a matter of who had more drive gauge to begin with and spent their drive gauge more effectively because that person doesn't get burnout or what? Oh my gosh, maybe this will be fun.
Right, I
Uh,
was actually wanting to go back to that because, as Catalyst said, the game's a lot about resource management, like a lot, and as such, you can see how much the drive gauge affects the options that you have. Because the moment you run out of drive gauge, not only do you lose the opportunity to do all of these things that are important both on offense and defense, but you're in serious trouble defensively, right? Because of burnout. So even though you can overspend the gauge, right? Like, so if someone only has one bar, they could still do a drive rush from a cancel. They're just going to burn out immediately, right? So you're never truly safe as long as they do have a drive gauge. But at the same time, the moment that you know that they don't, like, you can go ham. And I think that's really, especially because you can drain the opponent's drive gauge in a bunch of different ways. I think that's the next step in what we are describing right here. It's understanding how to put your opponent in a situation where it's dangerous for them to use these options because they just don't have the resources. Basically, it's a game within the game in the sense that it's like I'm thinking like playing an RTS. I'm playing StarCraft while I'm playing
yep.
I'm
Yep.
playing Street Fighter because I'm making them expend resources in a way that is beneficial to me. So it seems like the game is extremely deep, just on a surface level, based on what we're seeing right here. And I guess going back to the concerns is what you said before, Velociraptor. I just hope it never gets to the point where there's just so much where you
I
just
think
cannot keep track anymore.
the answer is it just needs to be fun. Like the
Yeah.
experience needs to be fun. Whatever happens, like something's gonna emerge as the stronger option. Something's gonna like there's always a character, there's always a Cammy, right? There's
Yeah.
always a top tier. And but as long as the process feels like it's based on a foundation of appropriately balanced risk and reward throughout, like pretty good, I think the experience turns out fun. And that's why a game like Third Strike, with all of its obvious imbalances, at a certain level, it feels like it's on that bed of a good balance of risk and reward. And so it feels fun to play. And that can be true of, I mean, that's true of every fighting game that's fun to play at all. I think it's based on that core idea of that balance beam. So yeah, the more we talk about it, dude, it sounds like this is going to be like an anime fighter in certain respects. It's going to be very complex. It's going to be overwhelming. There's not going to be the cut and dry this answer or this answer. What happened? It's going to be like 17 answers and more if there's EX meter involved. And we're going to just maybe have to be okay with that. But again, it just comes back to, is the journey fun? And does it feel appropriately rewarding?
Right. I think universal mechanics in a fighting game is a really important part. If you have too little, then the meta gets discovered too quickly because it's just relying on what the tools the characters have. And I think we run into a problem with a game like a more simple game like DNF, for example. If you guys been watching that game closely, just the amount that has been figured out so early in that game's lifespan. And if you guys seen the patch notes recently for that game, it just feels like there's not enough to go forward with. And with Street Fighter 5, we've had a lot of moments where like these characters at the top, we've had shifts in the tier list, but the game changes over time because they're adding more mechanics to the game, like V shift, and they're changing the way V triggers work. Like when we first played Street Fighter 5, Catalyst, if you remember at E3, the V triggers to activate, you couldn't even combo to anything. Like you had to do like a heavy button just to get like a light after. And now with Street Fighter 6, this is an opportunity with so many universal mechanics, and they're all available right away at the beginning. It's not held behind something that only appears when you get hit. So maybe we can look at like Street Fighter 3, where the parry helps the meta slowly evolve, where if something becomes too meta, then it becomes too predictable, and therefore everyone knows how to counter it, and then you have to keep shifting it. Street Fighter 5, the shimmy game wasn't a huge thing at the beginning, but we had to jump back through option select. But eventually it became so known that players are literally just taking the throw. Like you see poor Daigo get thrown like 5-6 times in a row, and you're like, what's going on with this guy? How does he not know to tech throw? What a noob. And that's just how it's just the paper rock scissors kind of evolving. I don't want to say paper rock scissors actually, because that makes it sound too
It's more
simple
nuanced
and
than
easy.
that, but yeah.
The meta. One of the things that Mur talked about is the StarCraft aspect of Street Fighter 6, the resource management of it, and he's dead on with that. This is where I hope that Capcom's not going in too rough of a direction for the fighting game community, because we're used to managing like one bar, and like you manage your super bar, and between matches, and that's it, kind of thing. Maybe some stocks or a few other things like that. This is going to be management on a whole different level than the FGC is used to, and the StarCraft comparison in some respects is apt. And it's there's going to be more strategy between rounds and going into a game than I think the fighting game community is used to. And it's quite an interesting thing. I'm hoping that the community is responsive to that. But as Velociraptor was saying, like, you start introducing too many complexities into these games, and they may not be as fun as they are, because it's one of the best things about a fighting game is pick up and play it. You can mash some stuff out and you're good to go. And at a certain level, you want that to change, of course. But there it is.
Well, for
Well,
what it's
first-
worth, early reactions to Street Fighter 6, and this is like a lot of general, public or people that aren't specializing in fighting games, have heard, they're at a trade show or whatever, and they play Street Fighter 6, and then they go, I had all these other games to go to, but I just wanted to sit and play this all day. And that was like first impression right off the bat. So maybe it's just because there's a lot of drive impacts. I don't know, but I think that bodes well at this very early stage.
Yeah, I mean, the game is very visually appealing. I think the RE engine just makes it look very good in a way that we haven't seen fighting games look, or at least Street
Mhm.
Fighter. And well, I mean, in ever, I guess, ever.
Yeah.
They put a lot of attention on the music as well, right? Like, they're getting us new themes for all the characters, whether or not you like them. But they're clearly putting a lot more into this game rather than just the gameplay. They're not only thinking about the pro audience or the very competitive audience. They're thinking about everyone else, which I think is the probably what's going to do the most for the game, right? Because once you have a lot of sales, because a lot of people enjoy it, that are not just the super competitive audience, then that gives you money that you can put back into the game to give us more, right? And as well as pay the balance team to give us balance patches. So I'm really hopeful that this will be a turning point for fighting games, where we're not just looking at it as, is this competitively viable, but it's also, is it fun in other ways that we hadn't considered before, just because no one has ever done it correctly, or maybe not to the extent that this game purports to be, right?
Well, I like that point, and it makes me think of Super Smash Bros, which has a very competitive scene. And in the competitive play of Smash Bros, things are very sort of honed in, especially the older titles like Melee, right? Like there's almost a way to play Melee to a certain extent. The game's figured out. But that game and other Smash Bros games and the whole franchise in its formula is so fun. It's like the majority of people that are playing that are playing with weapon or with items on and all the stages and the chaos, because something different can come out of any experience. There's always a new, like, well, maybe a hammer spawned next to the guy that wasn't as good and then you got lucky, or the stage changed at the right time, right? And there's just absolute forever chaos, never gonna like figure it out and have it ironed down, and that's super successful. So I think of Street Fighter 6, and I hadn't gone here before, so thanks. It's like for the competitive crowd, sure, maybe it's a little bit intimidating, maybe it's a little like we're talking about too many things. But for the non-competitive crowd, if you can have a slightly different experience and always have a chance against your friend when you guys sit down and play on the couch or whatever, if that's still a thing that people do, maybe that's the best thing for it. Maybe that's what Street Fighter needs. So hopefully that doesn't take away from the competitive experience, because I think everybody here is super, keen on that. But yeah, maybe it's a really good thing for the franchise.
Right. I don't want to go completely off topic, but with that being said, like Street Fighter 5, the only thing to do in Street Fighter 5 is play ranked. Like that's it. That's the main focus of the game, is play ranked. So
Arcade's pretty fun.
if the game's not fun to play, like competitively, then it's not going to be fun to play at all. And if you're playing a character that's like weak and you're just relying on the patch notes to make the character fun again, there's no reason to turn on the game. You're just like, oh man, this sucks. From even a casual perspective, you're like, oh, Ryu's so weak, I don't even want to play because my main is Ryu. But with Street Fighter 6, the main focus isn't online ranked anymore. There's the World Tour, this Battle Hub. We don't even know how that's going to go, right? It could be a more of a social experience as well, just people that love Street Fighter. And so if you're not, we don't have to worry too much, like Mir said, where the game has to be perfect competitively for the game to be successful and to be enjoyable. Then that will really help a lot if there's more content than just playing ranked all day.
Yeah, they brought in the Mega Man 11 and then Bayonetta some of the top people from those games to
Yeah.
work on Street Fighter 6, and that should help flesh out the content. And then Capcom actually taking their time with the game and finishing it will help
Yeah.
as well.
Right. So the final thing I want to mention, guys, is that TGS is coming up next week. So I just want to know kind of your guys' predictions on it. You know, you guys think they're going to announce a character or two? I'm kind of getting mixed information because, you know, everything's kind of mistranslated, but they said they're going to talk, for sure they're talking about World Tour. But on some posts, they said they're talking about the Battle Hub, and some they said they're talking about Fighting Grounds. So I don't even know what's going on. So World Tour for sure. But they also said they had like some promotional videos to show. So they're not 100% saying there's characters. They're saying they're talking about characters, but they might be talking about, you know, Kimberly and Jerry. So what do you guys think?
I think the game is coming out in the reasonably near future, and they've got a launch roster to reveal. And so I think it's very likely that we'll get 1 or 2 characters at TGS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the safest bet is that they'll just keep doing characters. But I was thinking about this question, thinking, well, maybe they start to finally explore the modes that are there. And then as you were talking about that, you said like they're doing Fighting Ground, but then also maybe the single player thing. And isn't Fighting Ground like maybe the banner over a handful of the different modes or something like that? Like I just thought that's how I understood it on the website that you see there. But my answer was I think maybe 1 character and some new information on a mode, switch it up a little bit, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Fighting Grounds is basically the classic fighting game package. So it's ranked, arcade, you know, all of that. That's
Mhm.
Fighting Grounds. Then the Battle Hub is supposed to be this kind of like, I guess, social platform on which you can interact with people online. We don't know anything about it, so obviously I really don't know. And then the World Tour is the single player mode. Uh, Personally, I would assume that if they're showing stuff about World Tour, I'm going to presume that that's going to be the main focus because they're trying so hard to sell this game to everyone, right? So 1 character, I think it's a given. I say that, and then we're not going to get a trailer. Who watch this?
Rashid,
But
Jinxed it.
Yeah.
two characters I would love to see. Obviously, I'm interested, but unless it's a huge announcement, which is possible because they did skip on Gamescom basically entirely, so maybe they were preparing for a huge announcement for TGS. Um, I guess if I were to make a prediction, at least 1 character and a lot of information on the World Tour. Hopefully, 2 characters.
I
We'll
hope we see a grappler. We still haven't seen a
Oh.
grappler yet. I want to know what's going down with grapplers in this game. I really want to see how a grappler deals with drive rush and all of that, and these punish counter throws. Like I'm so curious. And you know, with last time at Tokyo Game Show, they announced Karin first for Street Fighter V, but now I have no idea who they would even show up. Maybe Cammy, if I were to guess, if anyone. That'd be like the
And
next super
Cammy.
pod there.
Yeah. And also with the grapplers, we were talking earlier about basically doing FADC forward, dashes with parry into drive rush. That's, as I think about it, that's Zangief V skill, right? In Street Fighter 5. So like you sink too big of a normal into Zangief and you V skills, dash forwards grabs you. Like that right there sounds like a big deal for grapplers in this game if it plays the way we're kind of speculating it will. But
Right.
oh, there's a lot of possibilities.
I
This
know.
is,
I
as we
know,
talk about it,
man.
this game feels like,
I know.
and it also, I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't like come down with too much authority, but it feels, I'm optimistic, and I've been pessimistic about Street Fighter for a while, guys. I don't know if you've been following 5, but like those were some tough times to get through,
Yeah.
with the communication and the this and then the promise and anyways. But I'm feeling very optimistic with where the team's at, with how they're communicating, with how they're growing their games, with everything we've seen so far. And it's a little intimidating to a player like me to have all these options and make it feel closer to the anime side of things. But all that, in context, it still feels good. I'm kind of excited.
That's why I wanted to get all of us together before we saw this next build. I wanted to see where our heads are at such an early point in the game. So it's nice to pick your guys' brains on it. So guys, it's getting pretty long. We're probably gonna have to wrap it up now. Where can people find you guys? Like the plug, because I know you guys do your own podcast as well.
Yeah, we do a show called Talk and Block, and you can find that both. Every episode will go up on Eventhubs.com, our website proper. But we are also been doing a YouTube channel for the last few months or so, better part of a year now. And you can find us there. There's connections to it, links to it all over our website. You search Event Hubs on YouTube. And yeah, we've got a bunch of videos there, talking blocks. So we talk about everything from the newest stuff that popped up, reaction videos, to going back over the craziest banned characters in every game, and everything in between. But we also have a handful of videos exploring some of the histories of characters leading up into Street Fighter 6, and Catalyst visited Evo, and we got some reaction and some Evo cosplay videos. So there's a whole bunch for everything, everything a fighting game fan might want. Eventually, you're going to find it on the Eventhubs YouTube channel. So please come check us out.
Right
Especially
on.
the cosplay.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We should definitely do this again sometime.
I had a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun.
Let us know in the comments below, guys, your guys' thoughts and concerns on Street Fighter 5 up to this point. And then hopefully we can see some new surprises for TGS and some new balance changes to the game. We can have a better idea of the direction this game is going. We'll be, obviously, all of us will be covering the game very, very close. We have very high expectations. We have to trust the developers to do the best job they can with the game. So thanks again, guys. Take care.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.